Thanksgiving morning should have felt ordinary, but it turned out to be the day my whole world tilted. My son, now a millionaire at just 37, came to visit. The first words out of his mouth hit me harder than I could have imagined. "Dad, do you like the lake house I gave you?" For a second, I just stared at him. My throat tightened. What house? I never got anything like that. Before I could make sense of it, my daughter-in-law strolled up, moving slow and deliberate. She slipped her arm through his and smiled like she owned the room. "I'm just glad we're here together." Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. I never would have guessed a simple holiday question could knock the bottom out of my life. For 3 years, I had been grinding away as a janitor, barely scraping enough together to cover rent and the cost of my blood pressure pills. My winter coat was frayed at the sleeves, and I had worn it through 2 freezing seasons. I told myself things would ease up eventually. My boy Glenn was building a company from the ground up, running a firm with over 250 employees. He was proof that hard work paid off, and I was proud of him, even if our conversations had shrunk down to short calls about clients, contracts, and endless business dinners. After his mom passed 4 years back, he drowned himself in work, and I never blamed him for it. Grief gets its claws in each of us differently. That morning, the house felt charged, like it knew he was coming. I had spent hours cooking his favorites: turkey, stuffing, pies, the works. The grocery bill alone meant I would have to tighten my belt the next week, but I wanted the table to look right when he walked in. My little kitchen could barely handle all the pots rattling on the stove. It had been 5 months since I last saw him in person, and when Glenn stepped inside, the difference between his world and mine hit me like a slap. The shine of his watch, the polish on his shoes, even his casual sweater probably cost more than what I paid in rent. Right behind him came Denise, his wife of 4 years. She swept in wearing a cream coat straight out of some glossy magazine, her blonde hair untouched by the cold wind. "Dad, the food smells amazing," Glenn said, giving me a quick hug before helping her slip off her coat. She smiled at me, perfect, rehearsed, but the look in her eyes told a different story. We sat and dinner carried on with talk of expansion plans for his company on the West Coast. Denise added her bits about their trip through Europe and the expensive renovations they had going on at their place. I kept nodding, forcing a smile, though every word only reminded me how far apart our lives had grown. Then, right as I was slicing into the pumpkin pie, Glenn leaned back with a grin. "Dad, I've been meaning to ask, how are you liking that lake house I gave you a couple years ago? I knew you always loved the water." I froze. The pie server nearly slipped from my hand. My mind went blank. "Lake house? What lake house?" My chest thudded, the room spinning just a little. His smile faded. He looked at Denise, who suddenly sat stiff as a board. "The place on Cedar Lake. I had it put in your name for your birthday. You really do not remember?" I shook my head. "Glenn, I would not forget something like that. I never received any house. You must be mistaken." Denise jumped up, her napkin fluttering to the floor. "Oh, I just remembered. I need to make a quick phone call about tomorrow's appointment." Her voice cracked just enough to betray her, and she hurried to the kitchen with her phone in hand. The way she moved made my stomach knot up tight. Glenn frowned, gears already turning in his head. "Dad, this does not add up. I had my assistant handle all of it. The deed, the paperwork, the transfers. You should have been getting monthly maintenance payments, too." My knees felt weak. What payments? $1,800 every month for 3 years. My assistant swore it was all set up. The walls tilted. $64,800. That much would have fixed my car, kept my lights on, bought the medication I kept rationing. Instead, I had been skipping meals and choosing between groceries and bills. I gripped the table hard enough for my knuckles to ache. "Glenn, I swear to you, I never saw a dime of that money. I have been breaking my back, skipping my pills, and barely keeping the heat on." His face drained white. He shoved his chair back, the sound shrill on the floor. "That cannot be right. I have receipts, bank transfers, everything is documented." From the kitchen came the muffled rush of Denise's voice, fast, low, urgent. My hands trembled. "Show me," I whispered. "Show me the proof." Glenn was already scrolling through emails on his phone, panic flickering across his face. "The deed transfer. The payment confirmations, it is all at home. Dad, if you never got any of it, then who has? The room fell quiet. Both of us turned toward the kitchen. Denise's voice had gone silent. I forced my legs to move, unsteady as they were, and stepped into the doorway. She stood with her back to us, phone against her ear, but she was not saying a word. When she heard us, she spun around, cheeks flushed. "Everything all right?" Glenn asked her, but his voice had changed. I had heard that tone before. It was the voice he used when he was certain someone was lying. Denise's smile looked like it was stretched too tight. "Of course, just confirming our dinner plans for tomorrow." But I could see it now, clear as day. The guilt painted across her face, the way her eyes kept darting anywhere but mine, her fingers twisting that wedding band around and around like it was burning her skin. "Denise," Glenn said slowly, every word weighted, "did you know anything about the lake house paperwork? You worked with my assistant on a few things back then." The silence that followed felt endless. Her lips parted, then closed again without a sound, and in that moment, watching her face, I knew. She had taken what was meant for me. The holiday I had poured my heart into was unraveling into the day that would break this family apart. The quiet in that cramped dining room was like a cable stretched too tight, ready to snap. Denise stood frozen in the doorway, her manicured hands clasped so hard her knuckles had gone pale. Glenn stared at her with a look I had never seen before, half confusion, half suspicion that was only getting sharper. "Denise," I said, my voice low, steadier than I felt inside, "where is my lake house?" She swallowed hard, glancing between me and Glenn. "There must be some mistake. Maybe the papers got lost in the mail or the bank made an error." But her eyes betrayed her. I had spent 12 years scrubbing offices at night, pushing brooms when no one noticed me, and you learn to read people when they think you are invisible. Denise was lying, and not even doing it well. Glenn's jaw tightened. He reached for his phone. "I am calling Phyllis. She was the one who handled all this." "No, wait," Denise blurted, stepping forward too quickly. "Maybe we should talk this through in private first. Your father's been through so much. I do not want to upset him further if this is just a misunderstanding." A cold anger built in my chest. Upset me further? I had been living on crackers and peanut butter, skipping meals to pay for my pills, while she paraded around in designer clothes and sipped wine in Europe. But I kept my voice even. "Denise, we are way past worrying about sparing my feelings. I need to know where that house is." Glenn ignored her and finished dialing. Seconds later, I heard Phyllis's voice. "Yes, Mr. Blanchard?" "Phyllis," Glenn said firmly, "I need the paperwork for the lake house I bought for my father 3 years ago." There was a pause, then her voice came through clearly on speaker. "Of course, sir. The property at 892 Cedar Lake Road. The deed was transferred to Mr. Warren Blanchard on November 15th, 3 years ago. I have copies of all signed documents." My chest hammered. That was my name, my paperwork. Yet I had never signed a thing. "And the monthly transfers?" Glenn pressed. "All processed," Phyllis confirmed. $1,800 every month, deposited into the account you specified. Account holder name Warren Blanchard, routing number ending in 6194. The blood drained from my face. "That is not my account. Mine ends in 7283. Glenn's eyes cut straight to Denise. "Phyllis, read me the full account number." She did. I kept my gaze fixed on Denise as her face fell apart. It was not my account. It was never even close. Glenn's voice dropped, steady but dangerous. "Phyllis, who gave you that account information?" "Your wife, sir. Mrs. Blanchard phoned me in December, 3 years ago. She said your father's banking information had changed and provided the new numbers." The phone slipped in Glenn's hand. Denise let out a small, strangled sound. "And the deed," Glenn continued, his tone icy, "where was it sent?" "One moment. To the address Mrs. Blanchard provided. 1523 Oak Boulevard, apartment 4C. My stomach turned. I had never lived there. I had been in the same little house for 8 years. Glenn ended the call. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shouting could have been. His face was blank, completely unreadable, more terrifying than rage. "Explain," he said. Denise's mask finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they looked more like fear than regret. "Glenn, you have to understand. My parents were about to lose their home. My father's medical bills were drowning them. I only borrowed the money." "Borrowed?" I rasped. "You mean stole?" "No." Her voice shot up. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time, and the lake house, it is not like you were living there. My family needed a place to stay while we figured things out. Something cracked inside me at those words. Not like I was using it. Denise, I have been working double shifts to scrape together enough for my medicine. I had been stretching every dollar so thin it nearly tore. Most nights I ate only once, just enough to keep going. I kept my thermostat locked at 58 degrees because anything higher meant a power bill I could not cover. And all the while, Glenn was staring at his wife like he did not even recognize her. Denise, he said, his voice low and sharp, my father could have died. What if he had collapsed and couldn't afford treatment? But he didn't, she snapped back, desperation dripping from her words. He is fine. He is healthy. My father has diabetes and heart trouble. He needed the money more. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Fine? Healthy? I thought about the nights I lay awake, chest heavy with stress, wondering how I would pay for my next prescription. The times I stood in the grocery aisle with a calculator in hand, putting food back on the shelf because I simply could not afford it. Where is my house now? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, smearing expensive makeup into a mess. My parents are living there, and my brother's family too. They've been fixing it up, making improvements. With my money, Glenn said flatly. Denise gave a miserable nod. I sank into my chair, suddenly worn out to the bone. For 3 years, I had told myself Glenn was just too busy to check in often. I convinced myself his success meant he did not need to worry about me anymore. I had even felt proud of his independence, even as I was barely surviving on my own. All the while, he believed he was taking care of me. He believed I was safe and secure. Dad, Glenn said, his voice breaking, I am so sorry. I thought you had everything you needed. I thought you were okay. I looked at my son, the man in front of me, dressed in success, who had built an empire from nothing. But behind him, I still saw the little boy who once promised he would take care of me when he grew up. He had tried to keep that promise, but the woman he trusted most had stolen it from both of us. How much? I asked, turning to Denise. How much of my money did you take? She stayed silent for what felt like forever. Finally, in a whisper, all of it. $64,800, and the lake house worth at least $250,000. Her family had been living like royalty on money that was supposed to keep me from poverty. Glenn rose slowly, his movements tight and controlled. Denise, pack your things. I want you out of my house tonight. Glenn, please, she begged, reaching for him. We can fix this. I will make it right. I will pay your father back. He stepped out of her reach. With what? You have not worked a single day since we married. Everything you have, everything your family has been living on, it was stolen from my father. I watched her crumble, but I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just a hollow emptiness where trust used to be. For 3 years, she had smiled across my table, knowing full well I was struggling while her family lived in luxury. Her sobs echoed through my small house, but this Thanksgiving would be remembered not for family or warmth. It would be the day I learned that sometimes the brightest smile hides the darkest betrayal. That night, after Glenn sent her out, still crying and begging for forgiveness neither of us could give, my house felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful. The silence was heavy, pressing in with questions we did not yet have answers for. Glenn wanted to call his lawyer immediately, but I told him to wait. Not because I was softening. Far from it. My gut told me this went deeper than just a stolen house and a few payments. Thieves rarely stop at one job. Dad, you do not have to do anything, Glenn said, sitting across from me, his tailored suit wrinkled after the long, miserable day. Let me handle it. You have been through enough. But I shook my head. For 3 years, I had been Denise's victim, blind while she stripped away the little security I had. Now the truth was in front of me, and I was not about to sit back and let someone else fight my battle. I need to see it all, I told him. Every document, every transfer, every piece of paper, I need to know exactly what she did to me. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Mrs. Vickers, my supervisor, was surprised but understanding when I told her it was a family emergency. If only she knew the half of it. Glenn came back carrying boxes of paperwork and his laptop. We spread them across my small dining table, The same table where Denise had sat only a day earlier, pretending to be the caring daughter-in-law while hiding her theft. The first document we studied was the deed to the lake house. My name was there in black ink, my signature clear, but the moment I saw it, I felt the wrongness. "This is not how I write my name," I said, pointing at the scrawl. "Look at the W in Warren. I always make a loop on top. This one is stiff, just straight lines." Glenn snapped a photo of it and pulled out a birthday card I had signed for him last year. The difference was plain. "She forged your signature," he said, his voice flat and tight with anger. And then we dug deeper. The bank statements told a story I had never seen before. Every monthly payment Glenn thought he was sending to me had gone into an account with my name on it, but at a bank where I had never done business. Someone had opened that account using my identity. "I need to see this account," I told Glenn. He called the bank, but they would not give him details over the phone since he was not listed as the owner. So we drove there together. My hands shook as I walked into the marble lobby of Central Trust Bank, carrying my driver's license and social security card. The records showed the account had been opened 3 years and 1 month earlier, just weeks before Glenn's first payment was supposed to land in my hands. The address tied to it was 1523 Oak Boulevard, apartment 4C, the same one Phyllis had mentioned. Even the phone number on file was wrong. "Sir," the bank representative said, eyebrows furrowed as she scrolled through the computer, "you've never been inside this branch before, have you?" "No," I said firmly. "Not once in my life." She laid a signature card in front of me, the one supposedly signed when the account was opened. It carried a cheap imitation of my name. It wasn't mine. "This is identity theft," she said, her voice serious. "You'll need to file a police report immediately." But that was only the beginning. Glenn had brought copies of everything he'd ever set aside for me. As we sat in that customer service area, the full picture started to take shape. The monthly transfers weren't the only funds that disappeared. Glenn had sent extra money over the years, $600 when he thought I needed glasses, $950 for dental work, $1,200 as a Christmas gift. I had never seen a dime of it. Every cent had gone into the fake account. "How much in total?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Glenn's fingers flew across his phone calculator. His face turned pale. $67,550, he whispered. "Over 3 years, she stole that much from you." My head spun. $67,550, more money than I had ever held in my lifetime. It could have changed everything, kept the heat running, paid for my medicine, given me security in my later years. Instead, I had been living paycheck to paycheck, scraping by. We drove to 1523 Oak Boulevard next. It was a rundown complex on the far side of town, cracked concrete steps and flickering neon buzzing in the cold air. Apartment 4C sat empty, a for rent sign hanging in the window. She probably rented it long enough to make the fake address work, Glenn said through clenched teeth. But I was stuck on something else. "Glenn, how did she get my personal information, my social security number, my date of birth, all of it?" His jaw tightened. "From our house. I keep family documents in my office. She would have had access to everything." Each revelation cut deeper. Denise hadn't just stumbled across an opportunity. She had planned this, carefully and methodically, stealing my identity and my money while living under Glenn's roof, pretending to care. That evening, sitting in my living room, surrounded by papers that screamed her guilt, Glenn's eyes welled with tears. "Dad, I am sorry. I trusted her completely. I never checked that you were actually receiving the money. She was the one who suggested I set it up in the first place." The words froze me. "She suggested it?" Glenn nodded miserably. "A year after Mom died, she said she was worried about you managing on your own. She told me it would be a kind gesture to help with your expenses, especially since business was going well. She even volunteered to coordinate with Phyllis." I closed my eyes as the weight of her manipulation sank in. She had played the perfect role, concerned daughter-in-law, while redirecting every dollar into her family's pockets. "And the lake house?" I asked quietly. "Same thing," Glenn admitted. "She said you always dreamed of living near water, that it would help your health. She helped me find the property, negotiated the price, handled the paperwork. She had used my son's love for me as a weapon, turning his generosity into her scheme. Later that night, as Glenn packed the evidence to take to his lawyer, I sat in my small living room, staring at walls I had grown too used to. For the last 3 years, this cramped space with its broken air conditioner and worn-out furniture had been my reality. I was supposed to be living comfortably in a lake house, buying my prescriptions without counting pennies. Instead, her parents were probably sitting on the porch of that stolen house right now, sipping coffee and enjoying their retirement while I rationed pills and wore secondhand clothes. But as painful as the truth was, it felt like the first step toward taking my life back. She hadn't just stolen money. She had robbed me of 3 years of dignity, security, and peace of mind. Tomorrow, we would begin the process of getting it back. Tonight, I went to bed with a bitter but solid truth. I finally knew where I stood, and even though it stung, that knowledge felt like power. The next morning, Glenn's lawyer called with the results of his own digging. I was on my knees scrubbing floors at the office building where I'd worked for 8 years. My hands were raw from the harsh cleaners, my knees aching on cold tile. But I kept pushing because I thought I needed every dollar this job gave me. Mr. Blanchard. It was Mr. Doyle's voice, grim and clipped, when I called him back on my lunch break. We need to meet immediately. What we've found goes far beyond what we suspected at first. Glenn picked me up after my shift, and I could see the toll all of this was taking on him. He looked worn down, eyes shadowed from nights without sleep. He had thrown himself into this mess with the same drive he used in his business. But this wasn't a deal to close. This was personal, and it was eating him alive. At Mr. Doyle's office, we sat across from a thick folder stacked with documents. He didn't waste time. Mr. Blanchard, your daughter-in-law hasn't just stolen from you. What she's done amounts to a small-scale fraud operation, and she's been running it under your identity. The words made the room spin. He explained that Denise hadn't just opened one fake account. She had opened 3 at different banks. She had applied for credit cards in my name, pulled out a loan, and even filed tax returns claiming me as her dependent while reporting fake income I had never earned. The Internal Revenue Service has been trying to reach you, Mr. Doyle went on. They've been mailing notices to that fake Oak Boulevard address. You are currently under investigation for tax evasion. I felt like I had been shoved underwater. Tax evasion? I'd filed my taxes honestly every year of my life. We know that, Doyle said, but the IRS doesn't. Denise reported that you received the money Glenn was sending. On paper, it looks like you hid income. Glenn's fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. How much total? Mr. Doyle flipped through the pages, including the original $67,550. The credit cards, the loan, and the fraudulent tax refunds were looking at around $92,000. The number slammed into me. $92,000. I earned $19,000 a year scrubbing floors. She had stolen more than 4 years of my life's wages. And the house? I managed to ask. That's more complicated, Doyle admitted. The property is legally in your name, based on the forged deed. Her family has been living there, renovating it with stolen money. In fact, they've raised its market value. I thought back to Denise's parents. I had only met them twice. They seemed quiet, decent people, maybe even overwhelmed by the lifestyle their daughter had stepped into. Did they know the truth? Did they realize the house they were living in wasn't hers or theirs, but mine? Can we get it back? Glenn asked. Yes, Doyle said firmly. But law enforcement has to be involved. This isn't just civil anymore. We're talking criminal fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Denise could face serious prison time. I sat in silence for a long while. I thought of the woman at my table just days earlier, sobbing and begging. I'd wondered if those tears were real. Now I was certain. They were just another trick. What about her family? I asked finally. They'll have to leave the property, Doyle said. If they can prove they didn't know, they may avoid charges. But they can't keep what was bought with stolen money. Glenn's jaw tightened. He stared out the window. Where is she now? She's at the lake house, Doyle answered. Our investigator confirmed it. She's been staying with her parents since Thanksgiving. Glenn's voice turned sharp. So she ran straight to the very people living off my father's money. Of course she did. That afternoon, we drove to Cedar Lake. I had never laid eyes on the house that was supposed to be mine. When we pulled into the long driveway, I couldn't stop the gasp. It was stunning. A ranch-style home stretched wide with tall windows that reflected the water. Trees arched over the property, and the gardens looked like they belonged in a magazine. This was what Glenn had wanted for me. A quiet place by the water where I could have retired in peace instead of counting change for groceries. Denise's father opened the door. His face fell when he saw us. "Oh," he said quietly, "we've been expecting you." Denise appeared behind him. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, stripped of her polished outfits, jeans and old sweater, eyes swollen from crying. "Warren," she whispered, her voice ragged. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her, this woman who had smiled across my table while gutting my life from the inside, and felt nothing but cold anger. "Are you?" I asked. "Are you really sorry, Denise? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" Her tears spilled again, but I had seen them before. I had believed them before. Not this time. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed. "It started with just borrowing the first payment to help my parents with their mortgage. I was going to replace it before anyone noticed." "But you didn't," Glenn said, his voice like steel. "You took more. You opened accounts in my father's name. You forged signatures. You filed false taxes. You stole his identity. That's not borrowing, Denise. That's fraud." Denise's mother stepped into view, her face streaked with tears. "We didn't know," she said desperately. "We thought Glenn was simply being generous, helping us through a rough time. Denise told us he had insisted on buying the house." I looked at her mother, a woman my age, and saw real shock and horror in her eyes. She hadn't known. None of them had, except Denise. "The IRS thinks I'm a tax cheat because of your daughter," I said quietly. "I could go to prison because she filed false returns in my name." Her mother gasped, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, Denise, what have you done?" But Denise only cried, spilling excuses and empty apologies. She'd had 3 years to confess, and instead she dug herself in deeper. Mr. Doyle stepped forward, briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Stevens, your family has 30 days to vacate. Everything bought with stolen funds must be returned or compensated." Watching their faces, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not revenge, just relief that the truth was finally out. "The police will arrest Denise tomorrow," Doyle added. "She should turn herself in." Denise looked at Glenn, desperate. "Please, don't let them take me. I'll pay it all back. I'll get a job." Glenn shook his head. "With what skills, Denise? You've never worked a day in your life. All you know is how to take." As we left the lake house, I glanced back once. It should have been mine all along. Soon it would be, but tainted by how it came to me. "Dad," Glenn said as we drove away, "I'll make sure you never go without again. I'll take care of you like I should have." I patted his hand. "You already did. It's not your fault she stole what you gave me." But deep down, I knew everything was about to change. The confrontation was over. Now came justice. 3 months later, on a gray Tuesday in February, the divorce papers were finalized. I sat with Glenn outside the courtroom as his lawyer came out. Denise had signed without a fight, already sentenced to 22 months for fraud and identity theft. "It's done," Doyle said. "The marriage is dissolved. The assets returned to their rightful owners. The lake house is yours. All fraudulent accounts are frozen pending restitution." Glenn exhaled. "And her family? They moved out last week. They're horrified, and for good reason." I felt both relief and sadness. Relief that the nightmare was ending, sorrow for the innocent damage left behind. Her parents lost their home and savings because she chose theft over honesty. The weeks after were a blur of paperwork. Glenn attacked the mess with the same drive he once gave his business. He hired accountants to untangle the taxes, worked with the IRS to clear my name, and oversaw every detail of restoring the house to me. But the real change was in Glenn himself. The man once too busy for a call became a son who checked on me every few days, drove me to the doctor, took me grocery shopping. "You don't have to hover, son," I told him as we packed my old house. "I'm not going anywhere." He paused, folding one of my quilts. "Dad, I lost 3 years of your life by trusting her completely. I'm not losing anymore." I understood his guilt, though he didn't deserve it. Denise had been a skilled manipulator, twisting his love for me into cover for her crimes. Trust that shattered so completely takes time to rebuild. Even trust in yourself. Moving into the lake house felt surreal. It was beautiful, but heavy with what had happened. Her family had cared for it well. The gardens were neat, the rooms updated, a screened porch added overlooking the lake that I instantly loved. Still, it felt like moving into someone else's life rather than reclaiming mine. "We can change anything you want," Glenn said as we walked through. "Furniture, paint, whatever makes it feel like you're home." I appreciated Glenn's thoughtfulness, but no new curtains could erase the image of Denise's father sitting in this living room for 3 years while I rationed my medication 50 miles away. The restitution process was more tangled than I ever imagined. The fake accounts Denise opened held not only Glenn's money, but also credit card debt and loan funds. Untangling it all required forensic accounting and months of paperwork. The good news, my new advisor explained, was that when it was finished, I'd recover the money Glenn sent, plus interest and compensation for the identity theft, about $110,000. I had never dreamed of that kind of money. Enough to live without choosing between food and medicine, enough to enjoy retirement instead of scrubbing floors until my body gave out. But it felt strange, stained by how it was stolen and clawed back. Sometimes I almost missed the brutal simplicity of my old life, when at least I knew where I stood. Harder still was facing the town's reaction. In a place this small, Denise's arrest was front-page news. Everyone knew what she'd done and that I was her victim. Some offered sympathy. Others seemed suspicious, as if I must have known. A few acted like I should be grateful for the attention or joked I'd won the lottery. One neighbor even said cheerfully, "Well, at least it worked out. Now you're sitting pretty by the lake." I wanted to shake them. Being defrauded by family isn't something that works out. The money and the house came with the knowledge that someone I trusted had treated me as a paycheck to plunder. So I kept quiet and focused on rebuilding. That first night alone in the lake house, I sat on the screened porch with tea, watching the sun sink over the water. It was beautiful, yet I felt detached, like a guest in someone else's dream. My phone rang, Glenn, calling as he did every night since I'd moved in. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he asked. I searched for words. "Grateful," I said finally, "and sad and angry and confused, all at once." "That sounds about right," he said gently. "You know, I think Denise was telling the truth about one thing. She didn't mean for it to start this big. She just couldn't stop. But that makes it worse, doesn't it? She had chances to confess and never did." He was right. Whatever began as desperation became deliberate deceit. She had hugged me at holidays, listened to me worry about money, all while knowing she was the reason I was broke. "I keep thinking about how proud she sounded," I said, bragging about renovations her family made with my money. With my money. "She wasn't just stealing from you," Glenn replied. "She stole from both of us. She stole the years we should have had together and the peace I thought I was giving you." After I hung up, I walked through the house, finally, legally mine. It was beautiful, but still felt like evidence of a crime. That night, I lay down in a bed that was mine, in a house that was mine, with more money than I ever expected to see. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt only exhaustion. Yet, it was the exhaustion that comes after surviving a long journey. Tomorrow, I could begin shaping this stolen dream into something real. A year later, I stood again on that porch. Everything was different. The house now felt like mine, filled with furniture I'd chosen, plants I'd picked, and photos of my true life. My mornings had become sacred. Coffee as the sun rose, watching the water shift with the light, a peace I never thought I'd have. Right on schedule, Glenn's car rolled into the driveway for our weekly breakfast. This little ritual between Glenn and me had started months earlier, once his guilt-driven hovering settled into something easy and natural. We'd both been learning how to rebuild a relationship built on honesty, not on the lies Denise had left behind. "Morning, Dad," he called as he stepped through the front door, a bag from the bakery in hand. "Brought those cinnamon rolls you like." I smiled, setting 2 plates on the table. "You don't have to bring pastries every week, son. I can feed myself now." He grinned. "I know, but I like bringing them. Besides, Mrs. Prude at the bakery always asks about you. Half the town's adopted you as their favorite success story." It was true. The same people who'd whispered about my situation during Denise's trial now stopped me at the grocery store to see how I was doing. Neighbors had brought casseroles when I moved to the lake. Even the mailman liked to share good news when he dropped off letters. Any word from the lawyer about Denise's appeal? I asked as we took our usual seats. Glenn shook his head. Her public defender filed it, but Doyle says it's a formality. The evidence is too strong. She pled guilty to everything. She'll serve her full sentence. 22 months had sounded short when the judge announced it, but as the seasons changed and my new life took shape, I'd stopped thinking about Denise's timeline and started focusing on my own. How do you feel about that? Glenn asked, watching me closely. I thought about it. A year ago, I might have wanted her to suffer more, to face punishment as heavy as what she'd done to me. But now, sitting in a house that was truly mine, with money in the bank and my son's real attention, revenge felt smaller. I think she's where she needs to be, I said finally. Not because I want her to hurt, but because she needs to face real consequences. Maybe prison will teach her something our family couldn't. Through the legal process, I'd learned more about Denise's mind than I ever wanted. She grew up in a family always short on money, always measuring themselves against people who had more. When she married Glenn, she suddenly had access to wealth she'd never imagined. But it wasn't enough. She needed to feel like the one solving her family's problems, the provider. The therapist her lawyer recommended called it entitlement syndrome, Glenn had told me months ago. She honestly believed she deserved whatever she could take because life was unfair to her. I'd thought about that a lot. Life had been unfair to me too when I lost my wife and found myself cleaning offices at night, but I'd never believed unfairness gave me the right to steal. Have you heard anything about her family? I asked. Glenn nodded. Her parents moved to Nevada to live with her aunt. Her brother found a job out of state. They're starting over. I felt a pang of sympathy. Denise's crimes had wrecked more lives than mine. Her parents lost their home and savings. Her brother's kids were uprooted from their schools and friends, all because she chose theft over honesty. I've been thinking about writing them a letter, I said. Glenn raised an eyebrow. Really? What would you say? That I don't blame them. That I hope they're okay. Denise made her choices. They didn't deserve the fallout. We sat in companionable silence, looking out at the lake. A family of ducks had settled near the shore, and I'd gotten into the habit of tossing them crumbs from my morning toast. Simple pleasures I'd never had time for when every moment was about survival. I've got something to tell you, Glenn said after a while, his tone turning serious. I looked at him. Go on. I've been seeing someone. A woman I met at a business conference. Her name's Lorraine, and she's nothing like Denise. I felt a flutter of worry, then made myself relax. Tell me about her. She's a forensic accountant, he said, helps companies investigate financial fraud. She knows everything about what Denise did, and she's not interested in my money. She makes plenty of her own. I smiled. A forensic accountant? That's fitting. Glenn laughed. I thought you'd appreciate the irony. She's also brutally honest. On our third date, she told me I'm too trusting and need better boundaries. Smart woman. When do I get to meet her? Only when you want to. I'm not rushing anything this time. Part of learning to trust myself again is making decisions without seeking everyone's approval first. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you for taking your time, but when you're ready, I'd love to meet her. After Glenn left, I took my usual walk around the property. The gardens Denise's family had planted were still thriving under my care, but now they carried my own touches. I'd added a vegetable patch for tomatoes and herbs, set up a quiet reading spot beneath the old oak tree, and hung a feeder that drew cardinals and blue jays. The house was becoming mine in ways that had nothing to do with deeds or lawyers. It was filled with my choices, my routines, my memories, things no one could steal, forge, or manipulate. That afternoon, I finally did something I'd been planning for weeks. I called my old supervisor at the cleaning company. Mrs. Vickers, this is Warren Blanchard. I'm calling to let you know I won't be coming back to work. There was a pause on the line. Are you all right, Warren? You've been out for a while now. I'm better than I've been in years, I told her, smiling as I said it. I'm retiring. The word felt strange, almost unreal. I had never imagined I'd get the chance to retire. I thought I'd be cleaning floors until my body finally gave out. But with the money that had been stolen and recovered, the lake house now in my name, and Glenn's constant support, I could finally stop working just to survive and start living for myself. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun drop behind the water, the lake glowing gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a message from Glenn. Lorraine wants to know if you like Italian food. She's thinking of cooking for you next weekend. I typed back, tell her I love Italian food. She doesn't have to impress me. I already like anyone who makes my son happy. As the dark settled over the lake, I thought about the man I had been just a year ago. Worn down, struggling, proud, but desperate. That man would never have believed this peace was possible, the safety, the quiet contentment. Denise had stolen 3 years of my life, but in a strange way, her crimes had given me something I might never have found otherwise. They forced Glenn to truly see me, to realize I needed more than money. I needed his presence, his care, his genuine attention. And I had learned something about myself too, that I was tougher than I gave myself credit for, stronger than I'd ever been asked to be before. I'd also learned something about forgiveness. Not for Denise, who'd have to prove herself in ways I might never witness, but forgiveness for me, for being trusting enough to fall for her lies. And forgiveness for Glenn, who had been deceived just as much as I had. That night, as I locked the door and headed to bed, I felt the kind of satisfaction that comes from a day lived fully and a life reclaimed. Tomorrow would bring new small pleasures, new quiet joys, moments of peace no one could take away. The lake house that began as a crime scene had become my sanctuary. The stolen money turned into my security, and my son, once blinded by a manipulator, had become my steadfast companion. Denise had tried to steal my future. In the end, all she managed was to delay it. Now it was mine, completely, to live exactly how I chose, and I chose peace. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.